Okay, so welcome to Thursday. We are going to talk about parent functions today. We're going to talk about the three different types of functions that we're going to learn about in Algebra 1 this year. So make sure you have completed the attendance check-in, and then a couple of reminders here. No school tomorrow. So tomorrow is actually like a scheduled teacher work day. So even if everybody was on campus, y'all wouldn't be coming to school tomorrow anyway. So it's a holiday for you guys, so you don't have to do an attendance check-in tomorrow. You don't have any work tomorrow in my class, or any of your classes for that matter, because you don't have school tomorrow. So enjoy your day off. Get a long weekend. And then I'll see y'all back at school in person on Monday. Okay, and then this is the end of Unit 2 today. We have covered everything in Unit 2. I told you guys it was going to be a short unit. And so we will be taking a test when we come back to school. We'll review on Monday, and then we'll take the test on Tuesday. So if you have not been watching all of the videos and doing all of the assignments, you need to catch up on this long weekend because we're moving on. We're taking that test, and it will be counted as a major grade this 9 weeks. So let's look at what we're going to talk about for today. So I'm going to go ahead and click the Today's Work button, and that's going to take me to the modules page. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom. Here we go, Thursday. So today is going to be a pretty quick lesson, so it's a good day to catch up. I kind of want you guys to have some time to catch up on anything that you're missing that you need to turn in. So check Skyward. I just put grades in so you can look and see what are you behind on that we've done the past couple of weeks. So we have a journal slide to put into our journal today. So click, open up that journal slide. And then remember, it's just one. So you go over on the side over here and you can right click with 2 fingers if you're on your Chromebook, click copy. I'm going to come over. Here's my journal. I already had it open. So you got to find your journal if it's not open. Remember that. I'm going to click the bottom and then right click with 2 fingers again. And now I'm going to hit paste. And then I hit do not link. So let's go back up here so I can actually, we can link this in the table of contents. Now this is probably the last journal entry before we grade journals. So we're going to grade journals next week as well. And I'll probably stop here for the journals and grade at this point. So Unit 1 and 2, everything we put in for Unit 1 and 2 is what will be part of your journal grade. So let me zoom in. So this is Unit 2, Lesson 4, and we're going to call this one Parent. Yeah, capitalize for me, and then Parent Function. So what is a parent function? We're going to talk about that. And I have misspelled functions. Every time I type functions, y'all, I misspell it. I don't know why. That's just the way I'm typing. I know how to spell it. I just type the N and the C backwards. Okay, so once you get that typed in, remember, you can pause the video at any point if I'm moving too fast for you. I don't want the video to be too long, so I'm going to keep going. You just pause the video when you need to. Highlight parent functions, come up here to the insert link, and then slides in this presentation. And you probably need to start hitting the down arrow in your Chromebook. Remember, your Chromebooks do not like to scroll down all the way. So it should be 26. So I see it appear. I click it, and then I click apply. So slide 26, and now the great thing is I can click here and it'll take me to today's slide. Excuse me. Okay, so Unit 2, Lesson 4, Parent Functions. What are parent functions? Well, I've given you pictures over here on the side, and this is a really good thing that you need. This is what I want you to be more familiar with, is the pictures. So parent functions are, they are actually I like to think of them as like the original function. You can think of them like your parents, okay? It's where it starts. And then from there, the graphs can change, move up and down. In Unit 3, we're going to start talking about linear functions. We're going to talk about lines, okay? So that's something I like to remember. I like to think L-I-N-E and linear. I see the word right here. I see the word line. Y'all see that? And so that's how I remember that linear is the picture of a line. Now this line, the slope, remember that's how steep the line is, can get steeper. So it can be raised up higher. It can move up and down on this y-axis. Those are called transformations. You know, I all talked about transformations in 8th grade when you did some geometry stuff. how shapes can move and flip around and then move all around graphs. So that's what happens to all of these. But before they move, the original, before they've changed, we call them the parent functions. It's like the original starting position. So we want to take some notes on the parent functions. So for lines, we're going to type here where it says type here. So if it's a linear parent function, something to remember about linear parent functions is I've given you the equation right here. This is the most common equation we're going to use, y equals mx plus b. There are other forms, and we will talk about the other forms, but there's one of the forms right there. So remember, m is the slope and b is your y-intercept, and that is what actually, when we change the slope and the y-intercept, that's what changes this function. But it starts off looking like this. This is the original. So the original, we want to remember that it's a line. That's the first thing I want you to remember. And then I want you also to remember that it goes through the origin. So pause the video and type this into your slide. It's a line that goes through the origin. And so that's what's important to remember about lines. The parent function, it is always a line for linear, and it goes through the origin. And you can see that's happening right here. It actually goes through the origin and it has a slope of 1. It's going to have a slope of 1. As we can see, we're rising up 1, running 1. Rising up 1, running 1. Okay. So parent, why are they called parent functions? Well, think of it like you and your parents. You are derived, you come from your parents. So you have similarities to your parents, but you're different. You look a little different. So if I want to say, well, how much do you look like your parents? I'm going to compare you to a picture of your parents, okay? That's who you came from. So I would say, do you look more like your mom or your dad? Well, I would look at pictures of your mom and your dad, and I would look at a picture of you, and I would say, oh, okay. So maybe you look more like your mom. Maybe you look more like your dad. I don't know. But think of parents as like the original, where it all started, and everything else comes down from the parent function. So that's what's happening with these. This is the original line, and then in unit 3 or 4, we're going to start talking about transformations. How does this graph change? Because we know lines are not always looking exactly like this. They don't always go through the origin with a slope of 1. Sometimes they have a slope of 2. Sometimes they're steeper. Sometimes they're shifted down. The y-intercept's not always 0. That's a transformation. So what I want to look at now is what is the domain of our parent function here. So you're actually going to click on either side, fill this in. So they're tiny, but you should be able to see there's little tiny arrows here on each end. So, and we've talked about this when we're talking about domain and range. If we have arrows, so we're talking about domain, that's our x values. How far does it go left and right? Well, over here to the left, it keeps going because there's an arrow. And over here to the right, it keeps going because there's an arrow. So actually, I don't need any of this. I'm not going to use those symbols. I would actually say all real numbers. The domain is all real numbers for the parent function of a line. Well, what about the range? How far up and down? Well, down here, my lowest point, well, there's an arrow. It keeps going. Up here, my highest point, well, there's an arrow. It keeps going. So the range for the linear parent function is actually all real numbers. So anytime you have a line with an arrow on both ends, your domain and range is going to be all real numbers every single time. So that's kind of handy to think about. So the next parent function, the next type of function we talk about, they're called quadratics. Here's the parent. Quadratics are a U shape, and we won't get to these till after Christmas. Quadratics and exponentials, the next two. We don't actually get to these. We spend the most time on lines. Algebra 1 focuses a lot on linears, on lines. But we will talk about quadratics and exponentials, but not until like closer towards spring break. Okay. So quadratics here is a U shape. And here's the equation that we see most often. Notice with a line, we have y and x. Now m and b are numbers, and what's the power on x here is 1. But for quadratic, and that's why it's called quadratic, is there's actually a power of 2 on our x. So for quadratics, what I want you to remember is that it's a U shape. And I want you to remember that the vertex is at the origin. Okay. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here. So this point down here, the very bottom point, is the vertex. That's what we call the vertex down here. And so let's talk about the domain. Well, if I'm going to talk about how far it's going to go left and right, that's our x values, that's domain. Well, there's an arrow over here on the left, and if I go all the way over to the right, there's another arrow. So guess what? The domain is all real numbers. Well, we can have every single possible x value is possible for this, because this keeps getting wider and wider, and it keeps going out forever. It starts here in the middle and it just gets wider and wider on both ends. Now, when we talk about up and down, bottom to top here, for our range, what's the lowest point this parent function goes? Do you see its vertex is sitting right here? It doesn't go any further than this point right here, which is actually 0 for my y value. So my lowest point here is 0. Okay. Whoops. Let me type that in there. What's my highest point? Well, if I go up here to my highest point, what do I have? Oh, I have arrows. So I cannot write a highest point. So remember, when I can't write that highest point, I don't even write that side at all. So my range is actually all the y values that are bigger than or equal to 0. There's no holes in my graph, so I'm going to equal 0 as well. So let's look at exponentials. So notice right here, this is an exponential. And exponential was a word that was thrown around a lot during coronavirus, because they were saying that everybody was getting sick at an exponential rate, because these graphs grow really fast. See how it's like growing and then shoom, it just shoots up really fast. So what I like to call these are, I say it has an L. It has an L shape, and sometimes it's a backwards L shape. You can say however you want. So that's what I like to remember about these. Sometimes it goes this way. So this is exponential growth. It's getting high. And sometimes it starts over here and it goes and it actually declines. So we call it growth and decay. But we'll talk about that way after spring break, okay? So L shape, or a backwards L shape. And then the parent actually always goes through the point 0, 1. Whoops, I wrote that backwards. 0, 1. So notice right here, here's the parent. It's always going to go through this point right here, 0, 1. So let's talk about our domain. So how far left are we going? Well, there's an arrow. It's not going to stop. So it takes in all these numbers on this side, and then over here, right, there's also an arrow. So guess what? All real numbers. Our domain is all the real numbers for x values. Now, what about our range? Well, down here, what value is this? Going up and down right here. Well, this is actually a y value of 0. So right here is a y value of 0. And look at my line. Now, it's really hard to tell here, and you really can't tell from the graph unless we can zoom in so close, which we can't right now. But this line actually hugs this axis right here, the x-axis. And the x-axis is always, remember, a y value of 0. So it gets really, 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 really close to 0. But I got to tell you something here. It doesn't actually touch 0. So actually, our symbol should not have a line under it. So I'm going to replace that one. Now, as far as how high up it goes, up here, have an arrow, right? So I can't put a value on this side. So this function right here is all the numbers that are bigger than 0. It never actually touches the x-axis. It never touches 0, but it keeps growing up. And all exponentials, that's going to be your range. It's not ever going to go below the x-axis. So something to notice about exponentials, let me zoom out a little bit, is where's our x value here? Our variable x. Notice it is the power now. So up here, linear, x had a 1 on it. X had a squared power for quadratic, but for exponential, x is the power now, and that's why it grows so fast. So we will look at these a lot more all throughout the year. You're going to keep seeing these over and over, but for now, just take some note on these. I want you to more be aware of the pictures. If you see a line, I want you to recognize linear. Quadratic is a U shape. Exponential, is this L or backwards L shape, because we're going to be finding domain and range of all of these throughout the year. Now, we've already found domain and range of some of these. You just maybe weren't aware of what they were actually called. So that's a short, brief introduction to the three types of functions we're going to learn about this year in Algebra 1. And take the rest of the day, make sure you get this in your notes and filled out, and try to catch up on any work that you're missing from the past couple of weeks.